Today you'll be hearing a presentation on the Topanga Lagoon Restoration Project from the project team that includes California State Parks, CalTrans, Los Angeles County Department of Beaches and Harbor, and the Resource Conservation District of the Santa Monica Mountains. Before we proceed, we want to thank Las Virgenes Municipal Water District for hosting us here today, so thank you very much. We'd also like to recognize any elected officials or representatives from elected officials' offices that are here with us. So if you're an elected official, if you'd like to stand up, wave, and say hello. All right. How about any representatives from our elected offices? Oh, and which office are you here with us from today? Thank you. We have a representative from Assemblymember Irwin's office. So, as stated,
I'm Elena, how are you?
Councilmember, thank you for being here with us today. As a team, we are committed to ensuring that all participants have the opportunity to fairly and clearly state their ideas, comments, and concerns about this project. We also want to provide a safe and equitable venue, so we want to work with you and collaborative and ask for your help. We ask that you please respect the format of the meeting and allow everyone the opportunity to comment. We ask that we treat fellow community members, agency representatives, and others with respect. We ask that we address all comments to staff and presenters, not other attendees. We are hopeful to maintain a conversational tone. And now I would like to invite up our project team to introduce themselves to their agencies. Let's start off with Lori. Hey, Lori, how you doing?
Hi. Thank you very much. Oh, good morning. Oh, please. Thank you very much. So good morning to all. I am Lori Hare, the Acting District Superintendent for California State Parks Angeles District. On behalf of California State Parks, I would like to thank you all for joining us this Saturday morning, in person and virtually. We are here to kick off the next phase of the future for future Lower Topanga. This is an exciting project with many benefits, which have been in the works for more than 15 years. We envision a multi-benefit project that integrates ecology, recreation, and emergency elements. This is a rare opportunity and one of the first LA County to address coastal resiliency problems by planning and strategically reorientation of existing structures. Today, we will share some background about the project and the next steps. We will be answering any questions that you may have at the end of the presentation. We will now introduce our project partners. Unfortunately, CalTrans cannot make it with us here today, but we have LA County Beaches and Harbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning, everyone. My name is Warren Ontiveros. I am the Planning Division Chief for LA County Beaches and Harbors. And just to give you a little bit of context here, beaches, Los Angeles County owns Topanga Beach, so everything west or seaward of PCH, between certain points. And I just wanted to give you some background on our department. We do have responsibility over approximately 61 miles of non-contiguous coastline in Los Angeles County, from Nicholas Canyon Beach to the north in Malibu to San Pedro. We have White Point Beach and Royal Palms, as well as Point Fermin. Our vision as a department is to preserve and enhance the coastline that we take care of for people of all generations, current and future. Our mission is to preserve recreational opportunities while sustaining our beaches and Marina del Rey, which is also county owned and operated. Our goals as a department are to enhance public access to our coast, build resiliency to protect and maintain our natural resources, while sustaining a productive workforce to deliver the services, the operations and maintenance that we do on the beaches on a daily basis. And importantly, we want to support the people who are in our department, who serve and achieve these goals, and we do all of this for you, for everybody who comes out to our beaches and enjoys the marina as well. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's my privilege to be part of this effort, and looking forward to hearing from you all on what you would like to see at Topanga. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Clark Stevens. I'm the Executive Officer at the Resource Conservation District of the Santa Monica Mountains and also the architect and planner on the team. I just wanted to welcome you all and look forward to your thoughts and interactions. Continued, a lot of you have been here in the earlier processes and workshops, so we look forward to showing what we heard and what we've done with what we've heard from you. And I would just mention the RCD is, again, we're managing the project, which includes a lot of funding from various sources. We'll talk about our generous funders. This is a continuation of work that RCD's been involved with in planning and design for lagoon concepts since 1999. So we're really excited about where we are now, and we look forward to your continued participation today and going forward. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Danielle Lefeur. I'm the Senior Environmental Scientist with California State Parks in the Angeles District, and I am looking forward to sharing this project with you. We have, we'll start out talking about some of the needs for this project, and we'll go into our goals and our alternatives, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say as well. And this is not working. Somebody, let me see. Something happened here. Let's see. Yeah, that's, okay, good. Great, thank you. All right, little housekeeping, we did that. So you are going to help us imagine the future for this project, and that's why we're here. So the Topanga Lagoon is located.
May I ask you to speak a little bit closer?
Oh, sure, how's that? Is that better? You know what, I'm gonna put it here because I'm probably gonna be facing this way. How's that? Is that better? Too close? No. Oh, closer than that? How's that? How's that? Is that better? Okay, I might have to go down though. Okay, there. Okay, let me know. So the Topanga Lagoon is located at the base of Topanga State Park and Topanga Beach, and you can see Highway 1 over here, and Malibu is located a little bit further to the west, and then Topanga Canyon Road is the other kind of edge of the project site. So the Topanga Creek watershed is really a beautiful watershed. It's predominantly unaltered, so it's very healthy. It's got some really great habitat, and it's about 18 square miles, the second largest watershed in the Santa Monica Mountains. So the project area itself can be seen here. So again, here is Topanga Canyon Boulevard and PCH. And the exciting thing about this project is that we have a collaborative project among several agencies. So we have in blue up here, this is the State Parks property, and then the CalTrans property right along the highway and the bridge, and then down in pink over here, close to the beach, and on the beach is the Department of Beaches and Harbors. So, and then there is a little part over here that is in the city of Malibu, but that part will be predominantly traffic control and management. So again, I wanted to point out that this area over here, this corner at Topanga Canyon Boulevard and PCH, because that's where the feed bin is, if people are familiar with that area, that's also part of the project design. So a little bit of history here. We have wetlands in California have really disappeared quite a bit. We're down to 5% of what was historically present in California, and this is from, I believe, 1876. And at that time, the lagoon was more than 30 acres in size. And you can see that's a little hill, right? So So this is really a great opportunity to save and restore the remaining wetlands that we have in this area. And this particular slide on the left shows the area that we'll be working in, and it's got quite a few sensitive ecosystems associated with it. It's got willow riparian, it's got some scrub, of course, the wetland, the channel itself. However, it's been severely degraded. And so even though it's got a lot of potential currently, the habitat is not very conducive for a lot of wildlife. So here's a little bit of history where you can see the lagoon. This is in 1916. And this over here is the Malibu Road, the initial road, going inland, so not along the shoreline at all. And that is a little farmstead there. Then in 1924, the first coastal highway was built right there. So you can still see the Malibu Road kind of along the edge of the slope there. And so this particular highway had a bridge that was quite a bit longer than the current bridge, 250 feet. So you'll be able to compare when we go down to the next slide. This is from 1939, and the Roosevelt Highway was actually built in 1934. And what it did was it took the initial highway, coastal highway, pushed it inland a little bit, so it realigned it, and then it widened it. And so when it widened it, it removed some of the slopes along the edges here, and it used that material to fill in some more. So actually, this bridge is now only 79 feet in length. So again, the lagoon over here is quite a bit more constricted, and only half an acre in size. So it went from 30 acres to half an acre. And so here's a good view of the lagoon today. You can see the constricted lagoon, the current bridge. This over here on this side is where the restaurants are located. Here's the motel. And here is the gateway corner at Topanga Canyon Road and PCH. And of course, the beach. So what's the need for this project, really? Well, we have several endangered fish currently in the lagoon. The tidewater goby is really the main population, successful population that we have in the Santa Monica Mountains. It's a very vibrant population, and we want to definitely maintain and maybe restore additionally for that species. And then the steelhead trout is also endangered, and it's got an anadromous life cycle, so it needs to come back into the creek to actually spawn. And the really special thing about the southern steelhead trout is that they don't have to go to the same creek that they were actually born in. So they have a lot more flexibility in terms of their life cycle, so they can be adaptable with climate change issues. That can be really important. And they can also handle water temperatures that are warmer than what the northern trout can. Another really important part of this project is addressing the cultural resources. This is a very special area with some important cultural sites, and we would like to preserve, enhance, and interpret some of those sites. And one of the locations that we're thinking about is that gateway corner. That would be a potential for an interpretive center, something like that. The Topanga General Plan actually calls out this corner as an entryway to Topanga State Park.
Where is that?
That is at Topanga Canyon Road and PCH, right where the feed bin is, that area, yeah. So, and then another cultural resource that we have is the Topanga Ranch Motel, and it's eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. And we need to figure out what we can do with this particular historic structure, because as you know, it's been dilapidating, and we need to find some way of restoring it or changing it. So that's part of the different alternatives that you'll hear about today. And of course, recreational needs. We have about 1 million people every year coming to visit this beach. So it's really an important public location, and we want to find a way that we can increase the visitor experience, find potential access points to the state park itself, create better trails into the park system, potentially. And then we also need to address the issues of sea level rise and how they will be impacting emergency services. So over here at the beach, we have the lifeguard station, and on the other side of the lagoon is the helipad. And so it's really not conducive to successful emergency services. It would make a lot more sense if we could somehow combine them so they're next to each other. So that's another part of this project. And we need better access routes so people don't have to, cross PCH, just run across PCH when they need to get over to the other side. And then we're also going to be addressing parking and how to create a more unified parking plan for the area. Right now, we have conforming and non-conforming parking, and a lot of people are parking right along PCH. And then we also have some people parking along in the concessions area, and then some day use parking. But there's some unused potential parking on the west side of the lagoon, and then also along Topanga Canyon Boulevard that we can explore. And a huge issue that we really need to address is storm damage and sea level rise. So we're losing a lot of beach right now. Some structures are being threatened, like the lifeguard station, and we really need to find some solutions to that as well, especially since we know that, that what we're going to be seeing in the future, in the next 30 years or less, is a lot more flooding along that stretch. And I think we're ready for Rosie. All right.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. It's really great to see so many faces here who've been part of this project since we started these conversations in the way back to over 20 years ago. And it's also great to see new people who are coming and enjoying and engaging with us on this. So just to kind of give a little story of the pathway that we've done, in this 20 years, we started out working with CalTrans to figure out how do we get a bigger bridge? And so that was one of the first steps that hurdles that we hit in 2004. And so, with CalTrans being willing to consider replacing the small bridge with a bigger bridge so that we would have freedom space for the creek to adjust and meander as it needs to in response to sea level rise over time. That sort of set the stage after the Topanga State Park General Plan was certified in 2012 for us to reinitiate and reengage and get going again. And so we did a couple of design charrettes. I see faces in this room who were there putting pen to paper and helping provide your thoughts and guidance on where you'd like to see what go. And this time last year, we initiated the formal CEQA process, where we had our formal scoping meeting. And one of the advantages of taking our time with that, and part of the reason why we're continuing with this conversation today, is because Out of that, we identified a couple knowledge gaps that we really wanted to hone in on. So we were able to figure out ways to begin to answer some additional questions, particularly around coastal morphology and also around nearshore deposition, because it certainly would be a lot nicer if we can take all that sediment that creates those 30-foot pads around the existing bridge. That's all native material that came right from the hillside, right adjacent. It's supposed to go to the ocean, and so we're trying to figure out if there's a way to make that happen. So we're hoping, and that's why the project website is up here, I want to call your attention to that, that if you have any additional ideas after today's presentation, please email us. We really do want to hear from you. But to summarize what everybody said over the years, it's kind of fascinating that in an over 20-year period, the same things keep rising to the top in terms of what are important to people. And we have reached out to not only public stakeholders, of which over 400 have participated, but we also have our technical advisory committee, which is a lot of scientists and the permitting agency people. They've provided their input and guidance. And then we were able, through a grant from the Coastal Conservancy and collaboration with Outward Bound Adventures, to reach out to underserved communities who their voices don't usually get pulled into these conversations. They come and use the beach, but they don't necessarily know how to engage. So we really made a very concerted effort to try to include what they thought were concerns too. So you all can read, I'm not gonna read this to you, but I just think it's really interesting that when it comes all down to it, it all distills into a very interesting and multi-benefit thing, where we have the goals that are generated as a result of public input, and how to address these really important needs that haven't gotten, Danielle just went through that laundry list. It hasn't gotten any better in the 20 years we've been doing this process. And we're running out of time if we're going to try to help some of our endangered fishes. So we want to expand and restore the lagoon ecosystem, integrate public access, recreation, and visitor serving needs, and proactively address sea level rise while we protect the existing biological, cultural, and recreational resources. So it's a really important kind of collaborative effort that tries to put all these things together. And when you break it down, it kind of falls into two patterns, or pieces, really. One is the ecological services. Topanga is a very unique watershed. It's one of the only watersheds left that does not have invasive species in it other than crayfish and arundo, and it still maintains a natural hydrologic regime. And all of the designs that we're looking at preserve and respect that natural hydrologic regime. So there's no intention to change any of those kinds of conditions. And what that does is it sort of sets the stage for us to make sure that we don't do any harm to what's working while we create space for what's working to expand and adjust over time. And the tension really comes with that number of 1 million visitors that we have a year. And how do we make sure that the ecological services and functions that really can only happen at Topanga Lagoon? We're the only place left in Southern California, south of Ventura, that has those 2 endangered species of fish. They don't exist anywhere else anymore. And if we lose them, that would be a real tragedy. So, how do we kind of integrate all those pieces and make it work? So that's what we've been working on, and that's what we've really appreciated all of your input and guidance on. And I just want to leave you with the thought that, there are many places we can put people. There aren't many places we can put these fish. Thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to John.
Hi, everyone. John Oda, with environmental scientist with State Parks. And I'm going to walk through the 4 alternatives that are being considered under the CEQA process. Here again, you can see the project area, and I just wanted to touch on briefly this square that's out in the nearshore zone. Some of you might have noticed that. We are looking into beneficial reuse of any sediment that is taken out to expand the lagoon, put that into the nearshore environment to kind of replenish the beach, and that is why that box is part of our project area. So our first alternative is if we do nothing. In that case, conditions stay as they are. The endangered species that are present in the area don't have expanded habitat. Their critical habitat remains fragile. We have limited access for the public to, reach or the recreational areas. We have unused space, and in general, the area around the project has, invasive species and generally worse habitat. Now, looking at the project alternatives, the first can be thought of as maximizing the lagoon. In this, the existing bridge over PCH is expanded from 79 feet to 460, and this increases the wetted and riparian habitat from the existing ½ acre to approximately 10 acres, and we also see over an acre of sandy beach reclaimed as well. And just to kind of go over the basic layout, you can see Topanga Canyon Boulevard and then PCH. At the corner, we have what we've been referring to as the gateway corner, a kind of green open space to greet people to Topanga State Park, interpretive opportunities and parking. This area stays generally the same in all of our project alternatives in which a project happens, so I'll be covering it less. Where the project alternatives really differ tends to be in this lagoon area. And so for alternative 2, you can see this red line. That is where fill, the historic fill that was put in when the current alignment was made, is removed. And in this, we maximize the lagoon by removing fill on both the east and west side of the creek. As a result of this, we do have impacts to the historic Topanga Ranch Motel, which would have to be addressed either with relocation or extensive documentation of those resources, but it would have to be something that we would have to address. And this gives us a very large area for the lagoon and riparian areas to kind of dynamically move. And then over on the beach side, you can see where there's some existing berms that's kind of being underutilized. Those are also removed, and that can become both lagoon area and sandy beach space, probably would move back and forth depending on conditions. Alternative 3 can be thought of as maximizing the historic resources on site. The bridge work remains the same as in alternative 2. However, in this alternative, there is a focus on the restored historical Topanga Ranch Motel, and as a result, the wetted and riparian habitat increase is smaller. It's ½ an acre to 7 acres instead of 10, but it's still, a very significant increase on what's remaining and slightly more beach space. And you can see here, the main difference is where the existing Topanga Ranch Motel is. We do end up losing some of the existing units along this western end because the slope that they're on is just unstable, and the slope there is falling in a way that can't really be restored, so we would lose that row, but all of the remaining cabins would be preserved and restored, either as use as overnight accommodations or an interpretive opportunity or staff offices for parks or some combination of those uses. And the majority of the gain under this alternative is over here on the west side of the creek, which remains relatively the same. And the final project alternative can be thought of as maximizing sea level rise resiliency. In this, the bridge passage remains the same in terms of the expanded bridge, but the realignment of PCH northward changes the existing alignment and allows more space to retreat up the beach and minimize impacts of sea level rise. And the increase to wetted and riparian habitat is roughly the same as in the previous alternative, and this sees the largest sandy beach gains at almost 2 acres. And in this, you can see the black lines represent the new alignment of PCH. It moves north into what's currently the parking lot for the Topanga Ranch Motel. We lose more cabins under this alternative than under the previous one, but still a majority of what's existing is retained. And then you can see along the beach where the current infrastructure is, this has the most adjustment north up the beach, which would limit the potential for flooding further down the line. And so what benefits do we get to meet the goals that were identified during public comment phase? The longer bridge expands the potential lagoon footprint. It also improves fish passage and refugia. Because the bridge is so narrow at this point, when we do have large rain events, the flow rate is very, very high. It tends to flush everything out of the existing lagoon, and it makes it hard for steelhead to swim upstream because the water is moving so quickly. By widening the bridge, we slow down the flow of the water coming through, less likely to push tidewater goby out into the ocean, more likely for steelhead to be able to go up the creek. By removing existing fill, we give area to restore kind of the natural topography and make more habitat available for species. And this kind of gives freedom space. We're not going to necessarily dictate exactly where, certain habitat ends up or, what species use what areas, but they have room to move around and adjust to changing conditions like sea level rise. And we get the nearshore benefit of taking local fill and moving it out into the nearshore area. And over here we have a demonstration. This is the existing lagoon, and you can see the blue area is the wetted area, the green is the riparian, and right now it's very severely constricted by the channel. Under alternative 2, we have a much larger area for riparian and potentially wetted channels, and then it's much wider along the bridge, so you're decreasing that flow rate. And then here under alternative 3, we can see the bridge is very similar, and we just lose some of that riparian area to retain the motel. And with that, I will hand it off to Warren.
Okay, so diving into the aspect of coastal resiliency, the project aims to respond to this reality of increased sea level rise and more immediately, the impacts of storms and extreme erosion to our coast. So just to get a little bit into this topic of placing the sediment in the nearshore area, this is a very common practice in coastal management. For example, when there's maintenance dredging of Marina del Rey, that sediment is picked up and typically moved a little bit downshore to Dockweiler State Beach in the nearshore area, and through natural processes, that sediment, some of it ends up on the shoreline, just through wind and water movement in the ocean. So through that process, this project could increase the width of the beach, and also the plan would be to take that existing lifeguard station and rebuild one farther towards PCH. And so getting more into this topic of coastal resiliency, you can see on this excerpt from Alternative 4, this is that one that moves PCH farther north away from the shoreline. That would be one way to adapt for coastal resiliency, to make this a wider beach, move the facilities farther away from the ocean. And you can see, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, the helipad that's currently, the helipad area is an informal, it's not paved. It's west of the lagoon. This alternative, actually all y'all, the 2, 3, and 4, move the helipad to be closer to the lifeguard station. This one you can see is a little bit farther north. So on the aspect of beach habitat, removing the berms that are alongside the lagoon. That creates some opportunities for potential new habitat, and this is a rendering on the bottom. You can see at the top, you can see that berm. This is looking east from the lagoon area. At the bottom, you can see a rendering of how that would look after the project is completed. And then from the aspect of coastal access, we're looking at making a more cohesive parking plan and also improving bus stop amenities. You can see there's a close-up of the bus stop near Pacific Coast Highway and Topanga Canyon Boulevard intersection. There's some stairs going down from PCH to the beach and improved amenities associated with interpretive center and restrooms at that Topanga Canyon, the gateway area that we've talked about before. And also along the lines of coastal access, this project would create new trail connections that would create a better user experience between the beach and the state park property to the north. And you can see in those reddish-orange lines how these trails would make those connections around the lagoon up to the state park property and back down around. Those red lines are new trails, and the blue ones are existing. And as far as improved visitor experience, we're looking at this new Gateway Corner Visitors Hub on the state park property with new interpretive features. And that would be a transition area between the beach and the Beaches and Harbors County services to the state parks services on their property. And I think at this point, I'm turning it over, right?
Thank you very much. I'm Barbara Tejada. I'm the Cultural Resource Program Manager for State Parks Angeles District, and also the Acting District Interpretive Coordinator and the Tribal Liaison on this project. So a little bit just more on the improved visitor experience. Again, as Warren mentioned, we're looking at some interpretive features here at this gateway. So there's, Topanga State Park has multiple entries across the, on the edges, but there's no kind of, other than Trippett Ranch, no big kind of, here you are in Topanga State Park, and most people going down PCH have no idea. So the concept is that it's this welcome, it's an introduction to, the place name of Topanga, which is a native Gabrielino Tongva place name location from that corner of the creek area as a welcome into the mountains. We'd also be looking for the motel itself, looking at that as a possibility for either overnight accommodations, group accommodations, or day use interpretive elements in those alternatives 3 and 4. And we'll be looking at this visitor serving concessions opportunities. There are several, as you know, restaurants and stores down in that area. What would make sense to provide concessions for the park visitors in that area. And of course, looking at parking as all a part of those improving the visitor experience. So a little, as I mentioned, this will identify the plan for the Topanga Ranch Motel. As Danielle mentioned, it is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places as one of the last remaining 1930s auto courts in this configuration. There's a lot of 1950s Route 66 style motels we've probably seen, but very few, only one other in California of this 1930s early recreation development. Portions of the cabins actually date back to the 20s in the Cooper's Auto Camp, and then they were relocated after the fill was put in for the highway. So this project does provide some interpretation of those cultural resources, both historic and tribal cultural resources. So as I mentioned, the village of Topanga, we believe, is located in this area, probably buried under all of that fill that was put in for the highway widening. And so we would love to incorporate the native history of this location as well. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jamie. With all those visitor services, wastewater is another consideration on those projects.
Thanks, Barbara. Yes, I get the exciting topic to talk about things that are under the hood. I kind of think of it as if you build it, they will come, and if they come, they do need to use the bathroom. So with this site, we're looking at how do we have 1 million visitors coming to the beach. There's a restroom facility at the beach. But with the opening, further opening of Topanga State Park, we need to really consider how we update the current wastewater system that's there. And there's really 2 routes. The first route is to find some sort of option for on-site wastewater treatment. And there's 2 options that our consultants have identified that are possible. The first one is to do something called subsurface drip irrigation, SDI. If you imagine the black drip irrigation system you may have at your house or you've seen in your neighborhood, it's basically that on a more industrial scale, but it's underground a couple feet. So it has some sort of superficial buffer. It's called SDI. The second option is a more traditional option where you dig deep percolation pits, roughly 50 feet, where treated effluent is put into the soil, allow the natural bacteria in both scenarios to treat it. Both options would require a little package plant on site that's actually underground to treat any effluent before it moves to one of these 2 options to let nature do its thing. For this to occur, though, the soils need to be right, and there's going to be future sampling this summer to test the soils to make sure this is a viable option. An alternative is to send the material off-site. And so you're looking at a sewer option. And I'm going to show you some info about what that might look like. This plan here shows the potential location of the on-site wastewater treatment. One second. So if we were able to use subsurface drip irrigation, the thought is to use it here on the western shoulder of Topanga Canyon Boulevard, which is really a site of past development. It's an area of fill. And if we were able to use percolation pits, we're looking at a zone about a half mile up from the coast we call it the Horseshoe Bend, here, also on State Parks property. Sampling this summer will tell us if those are viable. However, if a more intensive scenario of development occurs on site, for example, if the full motel was kept and all the concessions, it's highly likely that a sewer would be required to support that level of use. And so there's been, from a conceptual level, 2 different options that look to be possibly viable. The first is to connect up all material moving off-site here at the intersection of Topanga Canyon Boulevard and PCH and run a line about a mile on the north shoulder of Pacific Coast Highway to the intersection of Coastline Drive. And at that point, the system can connect up to LA Sanitation District and do its thing and move all the way to the Hyperion plant. The second option, which is closer, is to run a little line along Topanga Canyon Boulevard and cross over and use an existing easement that exists here where there's currently water lines, go up and connect to the existing sewer system, also managed by the county on Sunset Mesa. This is a lot shorter, so there's benefits and there's pluses and minuses with both options. Obviously, construction along the PCH has some trickiness. Going up the slope and connecting with the neighborhood also has some things to consider. Currently, Beaches and Harbor has its own system that they utilize for their bathroom facility. If a sewer line is determined to be needed for the alternative or chosen because it makes more sense for the project team and for a long-term management, it's likely that Beaches and Harbor would also connect up with the system. So some nuances on this. If a sewer option were chosen, the sewer would purely provide service to the site. It would not be allowed or able or sized to provide connection to landowners to the west in the city of Malibu. That's not the intent, and our understanding is not allowable by the agreements between LA County sanitation districts and the end treatment plans. So just wanted to make that clear. So some other considerations during construction. There have been 2 key goals that we've tried to implement and design for. One is that during construction, we do no harm to the existing resources. We have, even though the lagoon is very constrained, it's only a half acre, it is a key resource for steelhead trout. We have the only breeding population of steelhead trout in the Santa Monica Mountains, and they utilize this channel to get upstream and breed. So we want to make sure that when we do any work, that we're not disturbing that channel to the maximum extent feasible. So if you look at the grading plans, this little line here is basically saying all of the work is occurring outside of the wetted channel. The exception obviously being when you remove the existing bridge and the footings and you put the existing bridge back. But we're looking at methods to again, minimize disturbance to the maximum extent feasible. And we also have the endangered tidewater goby, that this is one of the most robust populations here in the lagoon. So we all as a team have a strong interest to protect it. Second, although this is a state park, and when you look at it, you see this beautiful open space. When you look at it with an ecologist hat on, you see that although the trees are in beautiful condition, most of everything underneath are weeds, invasive weeds that show you the history of disturbance on the site. And State Parks has made great strides at restoring it. But we realize to truly restore the lagoon, we have to really deal with that understory. But we are making every effort to protect the native and mature trees that are on site. And so the cutouts that you see here in the grading polygons, those are large stands of just massive elderberries, sycamores, and willows that we're looking to retain. And finally, we know we have important buried cultural resources. And so the intent is, when excavation is required in the fill, is to keep a buffer between what we need to remove and what may be underground to protect that history and honor that heritage. And then all of us that commute in Southern California, we know the hassles of traffic, and we know that construction projects can cause challenges. And so this project was designed to ensure that 4 lanes of PCH are kept open at all times during the project. And what that means is we're gonna have to build a temporary bridge, and you see that on the screen, where at some point you'll have 2 lanes of traffic going north as you do, but split with the other 2 going south. And those will be switched around as appropriate during the project. And we also know that it's important to continue to have access to our important recreational sites for surfing, for picnicking. And so although there will be construction at the beach at different times, we're always going to maintain some sort of coastal access and parking. Where exactly the parking will be during construction will be moving around. It'll start out by being at the gateway corner, that intersection of Topanga Canyon Boulevard, PCH, and then it'll shift around as needed. And so it'll be our job to communicate that and have it signed so the public knows how they can access this important site. We also know that Topanga Lagoon, the helipad's an important resource. We need to make sure that it's usable during construction, so we won't remove the existing helipad till the new one is in place. We're also having conversations with the local communities, including Topanga, the city of Malibu, and the county to make sure that as we develop our traffic control plans, our construction plans, that we're fully incorporating the needs of the emergency response plans for each of those jurisdictions. So in terms of the project timeline, where are we? We're currently in the environmental phase. So we completed a bunch of kind of initial conversations, about 15 years ago. We did baseline studies and technical reviews of the site, so we kind of know what's going on at the site about 4 years ago. And we're in the formal CEQA NEPA process right now. We expect the draft CEQA NEPA document to be available for public review early next year, probably February, but we're going to say early next year. We're going to have a 60-day public review period, so everybody has adequate time to review the document, ask questions, get their questions in writing. There'll be at least one formal presentation, and the goal is really to get feedback from the public and the agencies and the regulators on what do we like, what do we think can be improved, what's going to be the best option going forward. Once that's complete, state parks, beaches and harbors, and the project team will choose a preferred alternative, which will be incorporated and fleshed out in more detail in a final EIR. And then it ultimately needs to be certified and approved by the lead agencies. The next phase is a 3-year design phase, which we anticipate will be between 2024 and 2026. And then finally, a construction phase, if all stars are aligned and all funding is in place, between 2027 and 2030, and then a 5-year post-construction period. Anytime you do any sort of project, especially if restoration is involved, you need to make sure that your plants and your habitats they stick. In other words, that they are healthy, they're surviving, and with any project, there's usually tweaks you need to make sure that your plants are surviving and that you're meeting the goals that were set. A project like this, which is, decades in the making, would not be possible, first of all, with all of you participating and having your voices heard, because at the end of the day, these are public lands, which we're all vested in and we care about. But it also would not be doable without really engaged landowners, state parks, LA County Department of Beaches and Harbor, and CalTrans, and all of our very generous funders that have been supporting this project throughout the years, which include the State Coastal Conservancy, the Wildlife Conservation Board, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Assembly Member Richard Bloom. We really thank you for all of your time and efforts, and we hope you continue to work with us. For more information about this project, please go to our project website, which is located here. If you have any questions that are occurring to you either as a result of this meeting or that come up, please email them either directly to the email there, or on the website, there's a Stay Connected tab, which will have up-to-date information and links on the project. We will be posting this presentation as a recording on that website, so more folks have access to it. And we'll make sure that any comments or requests that you submit to us via the website and email will get directed to the correct staff member. And finally, we wanted to leave you with an image of what this site can look like after all of these great efforts. You see the project site as it exists now. This is a 1935 aerial that's had the topography draped over it, and then what you're seeing, the colored are basically the kind of an elevational gradient, with blue being wetted areas, light green being marsh wetland, and the darker green being more of a riparian zone. And although we do have 3 alternatives, I just wanted to show you one of them here, which is alternative 2, which behind you there's a bunch of visuals of this, which you can look at closer. But under all, you see we get a much more expansive lagoon. We get all of our facilities on the beach more protective, and we're just looking forward to seeing these, what we feel are really important improvements. Now we're going to move into the question phase, where we're going to be alternating between online and in person. We do ask that we have people limit their questions and comments to 2 minutes maximum, and just request that we all keep it a respectful tone and let everybody have the opportunity to speak. I'm going to hand it over to Joey.
Well, thank you, Jamie. As shared, now we want to hear from you. And as shared, we're going to rotate between those here in person, those joining us virtually. I'll help facilitate your questions here in person. Jelly is going to help facilitate those questions that come up for those folks that are joining us virtually. And as a reminder, as Jamie had stated, we definitely want to keep those comments and questions to 2 minutes. Once your 2 minutes are up, we will then move on to the next person. And thank you for the opportunity to be here with you and share your thoughts. So what we'll do is, are there any comments from those of us here in person? Comments or questions? Yeah, there we go. Is that better? Yes. Please.
Okay. Joey, could we have people say their name?
Yes, if you
possible, and
please.
if they're associated with an entity?
Yeah, if you would
That would
please
help
state your
us.
name and if you're associated with an entity, please.
Yes, my name's Marissa Coughlin. I'm a private consulting planner. And I was wondering, I'll hit the points, I'm not sure who would answer it. Any impacts to the adjacent single-family residences that front the old Malibu Road, which was the original Pacific Coast Highway, adjacent to this restoration area? The archaeology and what has been found as far as Native Americans, has that been done yet? Any of the research for what artifacts, because water board's having that in Sarah Retreat. Has the regional water board been interfacing with you? And then I have a question on the hotel, but I can do that individually.
And I think we may need to repeat the question into the microphone so people online can hear.
So you had about 4 different questions, correct?
Yes.
So why don't, for ease of purpose, why don't we start with the first one?
Okay, any impacts on the residences which are adjacent to the restoration area that are in the city of Malibu jurisdiction that have been on the beach like since the 20s, late 20s? And I want to know what impacts and why they can't hook up to the sewer if it's put in.
Yep.
There we go.
There are no impacts associated with the beach residences at all. So the project terminates to the east of them. There's like a little metal wall in place on the beach. So there isn't currently any anticipated direct impacts to existing homes on the beach.
in terms of cultural resource questions, which is something I think all defer to our those.
Yeah, and I did agree, there's nothing, no planned work on those residences. But your second question related to archaeological resources. Yeah, we have done the archaeological studies. We did a geoarchaeological study because many of the resources are actually buried quite a bit. And we do have what we believe is a defined area, and we have documentation, historic documentation from when the highway was put in and so forth. We don't go into the details of locations of Native American sites because that is, for confidential purposes. But we do have, are aware of everything that's in the area. And we've been working with tribal members as well with the Native American monitoring and reaching out to them for feedback and information.
I just want to add two things. One thing is that in the city of Nauru and along the residences that are there, the impacts would be during traffic only. And as we stated, there will be 4 lanes of PCH as there are now. So the idea is that whoever's the construction company that will be doing this, they're going to have to deal with a very specific set of constraints to ensure that there's no impact to traffic during rush hours, that they're not moving equipment during the night. We're trying to manage the highway part. It's a big deal. It's a very big deal. But it's also really important to do. The other thing I want to point out is that of the location of the footings for the new bridge, they are completely in areas that A, avoid the existing wetted area, and B, avoid all the cultural resources. So we were very, very careful and intentional. And the reason the bridge is 460 feet long is only 200 of that, the center 200, is going to cover and expand over the existing wetted width. The 130 feet on either side allows us to create trails underneath PCH and to provide habitat and transitional zones so that it, first of all, encourages people to go under the highway rather than try to cross the highway. Second of all, it allows for a really nice potential trail system and interpretive system that doesn't exist now. And last of all, what it does is it again provides that freedom space so that as sea level rise changes and recontours and you get whatever coastal changes are going to happen, not all of which are predictable. If we give the creek space, then it can adjust as it needs to over time. And that's the idea of that. Similar to, by the way, what we were able to accomplish with CalTrans out of Trancas. So the Trancas Bridge is going to be, the new Trancas Bridge is 250 feet long also. And that does similar things by getting people underneath, providing access under PCH rather than across PCH, and gives the lagoon there wiggle room as well. Thanks.
So thank you for your questions and comments. What we would like to ask folks is if you do keep your questions maybe one at a time so we can kind of make our way around the room, and then we'll make back to you. I think there was 2 additional questions that you did have, correct?
It's just about any interface with the regional water board.
So if you don't mind holding on to that, I want to make our way around and then we'll come
Sure, that's
back.
fine.
I appreciate that, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Sure, right here.
Hi, would it be possible for Rosie to bring up another map? I would love to see the size of the lagoon and where the Topanga Creek enters into it and better understand that. And better understand the size of it, diameter or whatever of the lagoon. And whether or not the trout, the steelhead, or not the steelhead, but the trout, how far up they go up the creek.
Okay. So we don't need to bring it up on the screen.
Okay.
We have shown it. This is the existing condition. You can see it all over. And basically, the creek just is a continuation. The lagoon, once you get north of the PCH bridge,
Yeah.
Underneath the PCH bridge, it's the exact, it's 79 feet. That's the expanse.
Okay.
And it kind of is wet or not to full or bank, depending on the rain. and it just continues all the way up. The creek goes all the way to the top of Topanga. The fish, however, can't get there through the town. So the fish are limited, what's called the natural limit of anadromine is these big rock boulders that create a barrier that are just south of town. So our fish have about 4 miles of stream and a lot of really nice refugee habitat in there. Does that help? And actually the Water Board and all of the other regulatory agencies have been a part of the conversation all along. So yeah, thanks.
All righty, thank you, Rosie. Did we have another question or comment? Okay. And if you don't mind speaking up, because I may need to repeat the question for those of us that are joining us virtually.
So my name is Melina Watts, and I'm interested in that there's a planned coastal trail that's supposed to go all the way from the Oregon border to the Mexican border. I'm wondering if you have a vision for how that's going to fit in with the work you're doing here, and will there be bike access along PCH that doesn't involve people putting their lives at risk for just being there?
So bike access along PCH, and then is there going to be any integration between the trail that goes from
Yes,
Oregon
and I
back?
think it's kind of the same question because I think they're integrated potentially, right?
Absolutely. Rosie.
So this is what you get for being associated with the project for 20 years. So the Coastal Access Trail is really under revision at this moment. And they're really rethinking how they're doing that. So what we're trying to do here is once again create space and opportunity. So even though there's no designated section of the Coastal Access Trail at this point in time, there could be, in the future as that evolves. And so that's one thing. And in terms of the bike stuff, that's been a really interesting conversation with CalTrans. And one of the things that is part of the project is putting in more dedicated bike parking where you can actually bike to the beach and secure your bike, as well as public access via the bus system. The beach bus, now it's really hard to know where to pick it up, where to get it. There's no real obvious access for even the public bus that goes along PCH. So by making those more obvious, more welcoming, and then people would be more aware of them. So
Would it be parallel to the ocean or inland?
So the bike paths are where they are now along PCH, and the bus stops are where they are now on PCH. But do you know where they are on PCH? Because if you haven't taken the bus, you probably have no idea. So they're actually kind of hidden in the Oasis stuff on the north side of PCH, and they're right at the intersection of Topanga and PCH by the traffic signal on the south side. So there will be one on either side.
I just wanted to provide a couple clarifying marks. There's 2 trails that have the name Coast Trail in them, and they're slightly different. There's one that goes through the Santa Monica Mountains, and there was a concept to connect it kind of down somewhere near Topanga Canyon Boulevard on the west side, and somehow connect to the coast. That one's the one that's been put on hold, and that's being managed, that planning process, primarily by the Park Service, but also in coordination with state parks, so we're dealing with a lot of state park lands. The coastal trail that goes along the physical coast itself, there's going to need to be further conversations about how to sign that. It exists, it's just not well signed. So similar to as Malibu Lagoon, that's really great signage and coordination with that team that was facilitating people knowing about that coastal trail alignment. The same thing will occur for this project. We're just not quite far enough along. The second thing, just to clarify on the bike lanes. Right now we have, I think it's called Clark Class 3 bike lane. In other words, you bike on the edge of the road. There's not really any great striping. And because it was felt by CalTrans planners and others, it would be confusing to have odd striping that doesn't mesh what exists both to the east and the west of the site. The concept is to keep it the same, and the follows that would be the safest for bikers.
Yes, sir.
Hi, the city of Malibu, like most municipalities, has the ability to get in lieu fees for low-cost overnight accommodations. And we don't have any sites within the city right now. And we'd like to explore adopting the motel or any of the other structures associated with the motel as far as funding them. And we realize that state parks would be operating them and everything else, but if there's any interest, I'd love to talk to some.
Thank you.
So thanks so much, Paul, for bringing up the idea of these in-lieu fees, contributing towards that. We have a letter that's in preparation to go to the city of Malibu to sort of begin to engage along those lines. So Lori is going to be signing that letter sometime in the near future and getting that into you very shortly. So we very much would like to follow up with that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please. And if you don't mind stating your name and your question or comment.
Oh, sure. My name is Jennifer.
Jennifer?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
speak up just a little bit.
Sure. Thank you so much for all of the thoughtfulness that you put into this. It's really wonderful to hear. I'm curious of the alternatives that you shared 2 through 4 with the expertise that you all have. Is there one that you would recommend moving forward with, and what will be the process to decide which one you ultimately move forward with?
So any thoughts on recommendation of which alternative to move forward with and what the process would look like?
Sure, great question. I mean, we all as individuals have things that we love, but in terms of the process, this is an open forum for the public, the formal CEQA process to give their input. So state parks and beaches in Harbor and CalTrans, none of the entities have a preferred preference at this point, because as we talk about, we see there's pluses and minuses of each. Alternative 2 maximizes the lagoon, but the motel's gone, right? Alternative 3 has the largest motel footprint retained, but it comes at the cost of a smaller lagoon. Alternative 4 pushes the PCH to the north to give more resilience to sea level rise for existing structures and retain some of the motel, but it also has a smaller lagoon footprint. So really there's a natural play of looking at the pluses and minuses of all of them. And we want to hear the public's voices before those decisions are made. So that's a true public process.
Yes, sir. Did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I don't have a question, I have a comment. My name is Peter Greenwald. I'm with a group called Friends of Topanga Point. We have decades of experience surfing and at Topanga and also enjoying the beach there. I want to thank the agencies for initiating the process.
Could you just speak a little louder so we all can hear what you're saying?
Yes, I want to thank the agencies for.
Why don't you go to the microphone? This time you can hear it well.
Yes, I want to thank the agencies for initiating the process of creating a coastal morphology study to understand the impact on the shape of the point and the depth of the beach with this project. Topanga Point is a unique and key recreational resource for many people in Southern California. One of the best ways, shape-wise, in the state of California, with over 1 million visitors a year. Our group believes that the project goals are laudable, but there is potential for changing the configuration of the beach and the creek outfall to have changes to the shape of the point. And for this reason, we believe it's critical that there be an expert and very in-depth coastal morphology study conducted to model the potential impacts on those items. So we're looking forward to seeing the results of this study, and we are also looking forward to providing input to the study as it is developed. There's a lot of people who have surfed and enjoyed the point for many decades, who have a lot of experience and information which could be shared and could help inform that study. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. So just to follow up, if you didn't notice it when you signed in, this coastal morphology study that Peter referenced it's a work in progress right now. And one part of it is we've engaged with Integral Designs. They will be taking the modeling information, but they also want to have information from local surfers to help guide how they use their model. So there's a sign-up sheet out on the table. If you didn't already sign up, if you would like to be part of that conversation. It's going to be pretty technical. It's going to be all the surfer wave break, wave size, period, how it breaks, what it does, all of those more technical kinds of conversations. I'm happy to have you participate. There's two dates, 3 times. So if you could just let us know which dates and times you're available, we're going to try to make this meeting meet the needs of the most people that we can. So love to have your input and looking forward to that. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Darius Fisher, Topanga resident and documentary filmmaker. I'm really curious what projections and models are being used in terms of sea level rise and the kind of range.
So, question
Possible
about
by 2050, by 2070, by the end of the century.
projections about sea level rise
Correct.
over the
I
next
mean, there's a great
several
variance.
decades.
Yes.
So what we've done is we've used a number of one-dimensional and two-dimensional models that are looking both at sea level rise as it's been determined through what's called the COSMOS project. This is the USGS software that's used, pretty much standardized by most coastal agencies. It's also what the Coastal Commission requires us to look at. We're looking at sea level rise of within 2050 as well as 2100, and we're looking at a range between sea level rise of 1 meter to a little over 2 meters. And the image that you saw earlier is an image that shows what the projected sea level rise is, just based on current conditions, by 2030 or 2050 at the latest. And as you could see, already the beach and the lagoon are already being impacted. And if you go to the beach now, you can see it's already being impacted. It's not something that we're waiting to see into the future. So we're modeling using the best available science we can at the moment. The other thing our engineers have done and are doing, again, in a more detailed way with the coastal morphology study, is they're applying something called a fine mesh model, and that allows us to shrink ourselves. So instead of looking at it from a big picture of like a 100-meter cell, they're looking at it at a 5 to 3 meter cell. So it's a much more fine-tuned, fine-grained assessment of stuff.
Just have a quick follow-on. So if it was 2 meters, would the 4th plan be the one that would be most appropriate?
Well, so if it's 2 meters, PCH is going to be, in its current alignment, is really going to be threatened.
Is going to be what?
Threatened. And if you look now, you can see if you go between coastline, where coastline is, and Maestro's Point, one of the reasons why the Coastal Commission and the Army Corps of Engineers are so interested in using all this fill material for nearshore placement is because the current pattern is such that the deposition of that material could help replenish that beach, which is almost gone. The road shoulder is gone. And so, and if you go down coast all the way to Sunset, there's a lot of beach erosion along the way. So that's one of the reasons why we're really looking so closely to make sure that we can do that in a way and place it in such a location that it's not going to damage any marine resources or substrates, but it would then make that material available to re-nourish the beaches.
And I want to expand on one comment. Sea level rise resiliency is kind of complex because it's just not about structures and infrastructure, right? Alternative 4, by pushing PCH back, does provide the furthest distance that structures could be away from the ocean. But when you look at biology, you also have to think about as sea level rise comes in, habitats get pushed inland, they retreat. And so biology has to respond to that. So from a biological perspective, the more space you have for wildlife and fish to move and adjust gives a benefit there. So it's not a simple answer that one alternative provides the best response for sea level rise. They all do to some extent. One has a little more benefit to biology, one has a little more benefit to structures and people.
Gentleman in the back.
Curious, do you ever create like an actual benchmark as opposed to like models and things like that? Like to where you can measure and get an actual number at a certain tide, or I'm not sure how you would actually do that, but like where you have a physical benchmark and you get a number, as
So-
opposed to just, yeah.
So a question about benchmarks versus models.
Yeah, like do you create one? Is there an actual method for that?
Yeah,
And then also, like how many trout go up there a year on average, or over a 5-year period, depending on conditions?
Yeah, so I'll start with the benchmarks. So Dr. John Dorsey at Loyola University, who has just retired, he spent the past 15 years doing actual transects, and Topanga Beach is one of the transects. So there are actual transects measured with benchmarks, GPS locations that are repeated, that have been repeatedly looked at over time. And he very generously provided that information so that we can calibrate the model with that. So that the model is based on, you know, when they test the model, they can make it so that it reflects what actually happens.
So do you have a number?
Not at the moment, because they haven't finished the study. And he doesn't report his numbers, he reports them by transect. So
I don't know
it's,
what that means.
so it means like so if you have the beach here in the ocean, he's doing these perpendicular profiles from the lowest low tide all the way inland as far as you can go. And so and every couple meters, they take data. And so that's the data that we're able to use to show what's wetted, what's sand, what's eroded, and how that changes over time. There is a 2016 study that the Department of Beaches and Harbors paid for. It's called the Noble Study. And it also provides very specific data on Topanga Beach. Their prediction was rather dire in that they anticipated by 2050 Topanga Beach would have no facilities left, given the way we are now. So yes, there are actual physical benchmarks, so they're not just doing this out of time. In terms of numbers of trout, we've been monitoring the trout. We do snorkel surveys every month. Been doing that since 2001. We're the longest running survey of southern steelhead in Southern California. And the numbers really vary. And right now we've got about 100. The good news is that this past month we actually got babies, young of the year. Not a lot, but some. And that's always really encouraging when we have babies, because that means that reproduction is happening. And this population is considered to be a recolonized population. It was extirpated in the 70s and 80s. It recolonized in the 90s. And we've actually, watched and tracked that recolonization and reestablishment over that time. So, hope that helps.
Thank you, Rosie. Sir?
Hi, I'm a Topanga resident. My name is Michael. I'm an environmental photographer. You guys are discussing about lots of increased traffic to the beach and making it more accessible, which is great. What plans might be in place, what discussions are being had to deal with the human impact on the beaches? Topanga already has some of the lowest water quality due to human impact, and no dogs on the beach is just never enforced. There's just constantly dog excrement on the beach, nobody enforces that. What will the lagoon do to deal with water quality with storm runoff? And what will be done for future enforcement to protect this new beautiful thing that you guys are building?
So that's a two-part question, correct? Impact of human activity.
Mm-hmm.
And the second question, sorry, I just want to make sure that our folks that are joining us online hear the question.
It's just enforcement of protecting that place after it's built. Yeah.
Alrighty.
I'll start with the water quality, and Warren, you can deal with the enforcement. So, in terms of water quality, former Supervisor Sheila Kuehl and Zev Yaroslavsky funded a study that we were able to do in collaboration with UCLA, where we looked at the actual DNA of what's causing the fecal bacteria exceedances at Topanga Beach. And what was the two really important conclusions were, one, the water quality is not coming from the town. The water quality problem is at the beach. And the two biggest contributors to the exceedance, the bacterial exceedances, were the birds that use the lagoon and the dogs that you were talking about. And the other thing is that we learned out of this, which is kind of an interesting and somewhat frightening thing, is that what we call direct deposits, which is basically when someone just goes and fails to use the restroom and just takes a dump wherever they want to go. One direct deposit is enough to cause exceedances for extended periods of time. So all it takes is one transient to take a direct deposit along the bank, the rain to swish that in, and then there we are. So I think it's important to note that it's not contributing, the stormwater runoff from the upper watershed has not been the major contributing problem. It's really at the lagoon. And so one of the things about expanding the lagoon and making it a more managed visitor services is that potentially we could help control at least the direct deposit, transient kind of stuff a little bit better. That's one of the hopes.
I love dogs, sometimes dogs in the corners are.
So I'll let Warren talk about the dog issue.
I share your sentiment. I love dogs. And
The sheriff's department unfortunately just doesn't enforce it. The lifeguards have said we've stopped calling about dogs on the beach because nobody cares.
So yes, so this is a huge challenge. Dogs are prohibited at all LA County beaches across the board. So if you see a dog on the beach, as you said, it's a challenge for LA County Sheriff because limited resources, they need to prioritize. They're not going to necessarily come out and enforce our ordinance. And lifeguards, beaches and harbor staff, we are not law enforcement. So it's a challenge, and I see it largely as a community challenge.
Will state park rangers more closer to the beach now that might be able to help with that enforcement with the
Park
expanded
rangers,
parks?
state parks, would anybody like to comment about park rangers? Because LA County does, we do not have park rangers.
State parks, I work, all of us work in Malibu sector.
You're getting the whole team. I think this really speaks to this issue. It's going to take a village to address this. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi guys, I'm Sergeant Wilson. I work for the Malibu sector for state parks. I don't work Topanga, so I can't talk a lot about it. But kind of a very in-depth issue. As you know, the beach isn't the state parks. That's the sheriff's department. So it's going to be the sheriff's department that's enforcing that. The lagoon and everything else will be state parks rangers. That being said, policing has changed entirely over the past few years. And a lot of things in LA County are not strictly going in force as they would back in the day. That being said, in state parks, we're seeing a huge transition with new people coming in and out and everything else. So dog off leash, dog on the beach is obviously something that we're always going to deal with. It's just, I don't have an answer if it's going to get better, if it's going to get worse, or hopefully it'll get better. Pendulum always swings back and forth. So just be careful because as all we know, it's one of the most aggressive contacts we can get to. So, yeah.
Thanks.
One thing I want to chime in, one of the neat things about this project is an opportunity for multiple agencies to coordinate on issues like this. And what we've seen at other places like Ormond Beach or looking in Ventura, different sites have put together volunteer-based programs to supplement, like volunteer dog patrols, to be there and be like ambassadors for dog users on the beach so that there's buy-in about being a place where people can or cannot go and so that everybody's following the same rules. I think as we progress with this project, we're a little bit early. We're still trying to figure out what the preferred alternative is. But in the future, there's going to be opportunities to figure out what programs we can do to bring in the public to help support these kind of educational, interpretive opportunities that have real consequences for how our resources are protected. Because that's kind of the hardest nut for any land manager to crack is how do you continue to maintain the land with the resources you have. And it's really public participation is a key to that process.
And I do want to share that we have not gotten any comments or questions, just so that folks online know that. Gentlemen. Yes, and if you don't mind signing up and saying your voice just to project so we can.
My name is William Alford. I'm a Topanga resident. I'm a member of TASC, the Topanga Association for Scenic Community. I'm an Arts and Watch, but I'm actually here as just a citizen in some aspects. I've heard a lot talk about the Topanga Ranch Motel and about the burial grounds and that we want to protect all these heritage resources. My question is, what about the businesses that are there in play today? You know, we're losing our local restaurants. We're losing the places that are our heritage, the places that we gather, the places that we exchange ideas. What are we going to do to preserve places like the Real Inn that offer us still that unique experience that ties us to our past and our heritage?
So you're speaking about impacts to local business?
Yeah, we're interested in protecting all the people that came before us, and I applaud that. I applaud that. I would like to be part of that. But what about the places that are ours?
Yeah, that's a really important question because the community does really enjoy using those spaces, and they do represent some important visitor services, right? And State Parks definitely wants to support visitor services. There will be opportunities to relocate certain businesses in certain other areas, but it is very possible that there will be a loss as well, depending on the alternative that's selected.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. Roger Pugliese is my name. I'm a resident of Topanga for the last 42 years. And a question that I have is, why has there not been any meetings in Topanga proper itself? There have been meetings everywhere else but Topanga. So I would recommend that we have a meeting with the community in Topanga itself. There's a lot of older residents that we all know about that are very interested in this project and should know more about it and be able to comment on it. And it would be very helpful to have another meeting like this in Topanga itself.
So request a recommendation that a meeting be held in the Topanga community.
Huh?
A request or recommendation that a meeting be held in the Topanga community.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we should have started in Topanga, actually.
I'll come back your way, miss. Was there any questions on this? Yes, sir.
I'm David Blake with UCLA's Lacrette Center and Stunt Ranch Reserve. I'm just wondering, I know this is the beginning of this whole process, but is there going to be opportunities for the public to really get involved with restoration in this project? Is there any ideas? And if even in this immediate time, is there ways that we can support a restoration and really have a part in this to play to really feel attached to the project?
So for those of us joining online, will there be an opportunity for the public to be involved in restoration even at this point?
Okay, well, I'll start with Roger. So Roger, the reason why we haven't had a Topanga-specific location is because State Parks and Beaches and Harbors and CalTrans, as the landowners of this project, they see this as a much bigger community than just the watershed of Topanga. And so by having these locations, you know, we did one at the Annenberg House, we did one virtually, we're doing this one here. We're just trying to make access available to other people who are not just in.
You would agree that the 11,000 residents that live in Topanga should be heard, talked about,
Absolutely,
all that,
of
correct?
course. And that's the other reason why we made a great effort to make sure that this was streamed and available. So there are people, there are about, how many people, Jelly?
I think it's 20.
23 right now.
23 people who are remote on it. Quite a number of those are Topanga residents with the limited mobility that you just addressed. So that was how we were trying to make sure that we covered all of our bases.
So you're saying that, in fact, there could be a meeting in
There's
Topanga?
going to be another big public meeting, and this kind of gets to Blake David's question as well. So the process is, you guys should be putting in any questions or comments. Please put them in on our board. We are listening. We haven't closed the door. The formal CEQA process, the draft public environmental impact report, is where the rubber meets the road, really. And that's where there will be a big public meeting with a lot of preparation and a lot of stuff. I have no idea where that will be yet, Roger, but I am hearing you about Topanga.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that you and others here will consider another meeting similar to this in Topanga proper itself. We have a library, we have a community house, we have all of those things that could accommodate all of the residents who live in Topanga for a meeting. This meeting here is great, but look at where it is, and look at how far away from the actual lagoon is. That's all I'm just
So
saying.
actually,
Just
it's quite
saying.
interesting because I think in the demographics we've seen, while there is a core group of Topanga residents who always use the beach, the majority of the people who come to Topanga Beach come from the valley, and they come from a lot of other places. They don't necessarily just
Okay.
come from
That's
Topanga.
great, Rosie, that's great. All I'm telling you is that the 11,000 people that live in Topanga, you among them,
You're
need to
correct.
have.
Thank you for that. So, and in regards to participation, we're not quite ready yet. There will be opportunities for invasive plant removal. There will be opportunities for helping with restoration planting, and all of those are coming. We're just not there quite yet.
I'll be
So,
there.
yes, we are happy to have that. Thank you.
Miss?
Hi, I'm Liz Heron. I'm a Topanga resident, live in View Ridge community at the top of Topanga. In regards to this gentleman's question about water quality, and in the number of years that this project has been happening and so much research going into it, and I applaud you all for really working on this project. This has got to be a very difficult and complex task. All of us here probably recognize that, given the models and sea level rise and everything that's occurring. But my question is, in regards to water quality, has there been any research or inquiry done as opposed to having clean water that goes into Santa Monica Bay, a filtration system at the lagoon, at the beach area, that would clean up that unclean water at the lagoon, so then it could be filtered and immediately then put into the clean into the Santa Monica Bay?
So question about filtration into the lagoon that would clean the water.
Yep, because we know it's dirty in the town, clean in the lagoon, and therefore when it enters into the ocean, what could we do?
No, actually, it's the other way around, Liz. It's clean as far as it gets to the lagoon.
Right.
Because there's a natural filtration between the end of town and then there's almost 4 miles of natural habitat, natural processes, and we haven't overwhelmed them yet. So all of the natural cleansing, bacteria, fungi, all of those nitrogen cycles, they all still work in Topanga. At the lagoon, what we have is no vegetation, no circulation. It's half an acre that's like a big puddle, and it's completely constrained by 30-foot blanks all the way around until it gets to the beach face, in which case there it's the beach berm that goes out to the ocean. The reason the water quality at the lagoon is challenging is because, as we've noted, we have a lot of birds there, which we all want to have the birds there. And we have 2 other inputs, human and dog, that tip the scale. The risk assessments that are being done by SQUIRP, which is the Southern California Coastal Water Resources Project, which is associated with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, what they're doing is looking at risk assessments. So if you are exposed to an exceedance that is primarily caused by bird poop, does that translate into a human health hazard? And that's what they're looking at. We don't have the definitive answers on that yet. It looks so far with the data that that's not the case, that increased bird fecal coliform is not necessarily associated with increased human health risk, but we don't have the final word on that. That's a work in progress. There is no way to put in a mechanical filtration system, but that's what lagoons do. Lagoons and wetlands, when they're functional, they have vegetation that does all of those cleansing natural processes. And that's another big reason why we want that space and to expand the area so that as things evolve over time, we can get in the tulies, we can get in all of the nitrogen fixing, we can get in all of the plants that do that work for us. And so that's really the goal of all of these restoration alternatives.
So then, am I to understand then, Rosie, that water that from that lagoon that enters the ocean is because of the seagull feces, then you're doing research to better understand whether it's harmful to humans. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about the one person, quote unquote, taking the dump?
Well, that's something that is, an ongoing concern, and that's all of us, paying attention and, helping guide those kinds of individuals to appropriate places to use the restroom. And having more restrooms and having it better signed and better access and a more coordinated system, I think will really help with that.
Well, so then I'm really trying to understand this. The water is clean once it enters into the lagoon, and then the lagoon is doing its natural vegetation, but then the seagulls are recontaminating it.
No, but that's where if we have an expanded lagoon, then that will take care of the seagull feces.
Okay.
So it's not going to address the direct deposit, but it will direct a lot of the natural bird stuff that's going on there. And also, I think it's important to recognize that right now, if you look at the pattern of when water quality of Topanga Beach is bad, it's when the lagoon is connected from the lagoon to the ocean. And this is the first year since 2005 that we've had more than like 20 days when it's been connected. Because the drought, 2017 we had 20 to 50, and 2019 we had somewhere in there as well. But the majority of the time, the lagoon is encased by a sandberm. And that sandberm, that natural breaching process, we're not touching that. That's going to stay exactly the way it is now. There's no change to that at all.
So help me better understand why there could be a filtration system then right there going into the ocean.
How would the steelhead get in this?
Right. The idea is to remove barriers and to create natural systems that can do the things that we want them to do. So that's the purpose of the lagoon. So Liz, I'll have an offline conversation.
Okay, great.
Can I just say the lagoon is the filtration system?
Yes.
The new lagoon is the filtration system. Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I know we had a question over here. Sir?
Sure, let's make a comment and have a question. So I want to thank, everything you all have done. I think it's really great. You have these alternatives. You're considering the water dynamics, the study which Peter mentioned. One of the concerns I have when I look at these alternatives, I have a concern about how you sustain the beach. I mean, I'll show nice pictures of nice wide beach.
Yes.
But we all know that the beach width is dependent on the balance between the influx of sediment, which has been at a low for the last 15 years because of drought, and the erosion rate, which is impacted by sea level rise and surf and storms and all that. So, I do have a concern about how that's going to be maintained once you actually modify whatever alternative you choose. Not my own, which I favor, but I'm concerned about how that you're going to maintain the balance between the influx of sediment, which is dominantly controlled by rain and water runoff coming down the creek, and the erosion rate. So my question sort of is, what's your budget for this project and your budget for maintaining it in the long run?
Okay.
Because you can go in there, you can spend and do all this, but it has to be some maintenance in order to maintain the system once you've developed this ecological and geomorphological system. So what's your budget for this?
So for folks joining us online, the question is budget for maintenance for this project in the long term?
And development.
And development.
Yeah, I think, I'll start with this. I think Rosie and others may chime in. First and foremost, a key element of all project alternatives is that fill that is going to be removed as part of the grading, which is roughly 200 to 270,000 cubic yards, would be utilized in the near shore. So basically put out in a place where there's not rocky reef habitat with kelp, after biological surveys have been done to make sure we're not burying anything, and be available for near shore nourishment. That would move primarily down current and nourish beaches. Probably the cove to Topanga Beach, but areas to the south. The challenge is that the Santa Monica Bay has a deficit of material, right? This situation you're talking about, of a lot of erosion on the beaches and not a lot of inputs coming in. It's throughout the system. And so this one project alone isn't going to solve it. It's kind of the existing state condition that we have in combination with sea level rise. And in terms of budget for that, I mean, I don't see, I don't know, go ahead, Rosie. Like, it's a really big question.
So,
Well, let me just add, because it was mentioned that like at Dockwall and other places, there's all, they dredge and they replenish the beach more than once on a regular basis. So there's an ongoing need here for replenishing the beach with sediment, and in order to maintain whatever structures you build and so on. So I mean, I'm sure you understand this problem. I'm just explaining it further.
yeah, no, I think that you're right. There is an ongoing problem, but there's not an intention here for this particular location to do more than allow the natural processes to continue to do what they do. And that means that if we get another 10 years of drought, we're going to have beach erosion.
Which is more likely than not under current climate scenarios.
That is not something that this project alone could solve. The important thing that I think to note is that the sediment budget in Topanga coming down the creek, it used to be constrained until 2008 by the rodeo grounds berm road. And that was removed. And so what's interesting is that all of that sediment that had been blocked for like 60 years has slowly, with these storm events, started making its way out. I'm sure you've noticed that the lagoon is now about knee deep, and it used to be up to my armpits. And that's because that sediment is moving from upstream where it was blocked from moving for many years. And so one of the reasons we did that project first was hoping that we could get all of that material that had been accumulating and trained and in and out to the ocean, so that when we do the lagoon restoration of whatever it turns out to be, that sediment isn't going to come and fill in the lagoon and then make that not work. So there is, at this point, we don't have a preferred alternative yet. So until we have that, there's no way to think about what kind of budget we would need to do any kind of maintenance long term. It's kind of hard before the horse. We're not there yet.
Well, I think in terms of planning, you're gonna. One of the goals here is maintain the beach, and the alternatives show a very nice wide beach. We know over the last year, there's been a lot of storms, a lot of sand came down the creek, and the beach is eroding back quite rapidly.
Yep.
And that's a long-term problem for a number of reasons. And your project will go in and modify the lagoon, and as long as we have water going through there and bringing sediment down, we might be able to maintain the current status quo. But if that doesn't happen, your project, I am concerned that it may not have the nice wide beach at the front, as you've shown in some of your diagrams, where you remove the helipad that's currently there, and you show a nice wide beach. That's going to be exposed now to more erosion.
Well, that's actually one of the reasons why we're doing the coastal morphology study, is to look at that more closely. And so we'll have more information about that as we get that. But the point is that overall, in the long term, the reality is beaches are going to go away.
Well, I know.
And that's not something this project or any other project is going to be able to deal with.
Absolutely. So, and just one quick question for clarification. Your EIR, you're going to have it in 24, 26?
Yeah.
Is 24?
The EIR will be released in early 2024.
And does that imply that you've already picked an alternative when it's released?
No, it does
Thank
not.
you.
No, what it means is that it explores and provides as many details as we can about the pros and cons of each alternative. And then at that point, there's a 60 to 90 day public review period where you guys can dissect that every which way from Sunday, and then based on that, give us your suggestions on what you think makes the most sense. And at that point in time is when the landowners, CalTrans, state parks, and beaches and harbors, will make a determination of what the preferred alternative is. So there is no preferred alternative at this point.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I just wanted to introduce that what we haven't shown here, because it would be too complicated to do so right now, is that you may have noticed some of these things. Well, why can't the helipad why can't I have this piece from that alternative, this piece from another? And that's also part of the final alternative development is if there's a lot of, good analysis that shows we should have this, but we only show an alternative whatever, that element could be moved and combined.
So for those of you online, what Clark's talking about is that we call it the mix and match, where it may be that for a variety of reasons, we decide that the lifeguards decide that they want their building here versus there. All the building locations and the helipad locations were based on what the lifeguards thought would be a good idea. But they may, under further examination, say, no, we really want this one. In which case, that, even if it's not connected to the alternative lagoon design, they can be connected. So, but that's all stuff that will be outlined in the EIR.
So we are at 12 o'clock. We do have time for about another comment or question. We do want to thank everyone, but we will share with you that you certainly can submit comments via our project website. So, and actually before, I'd be remiss if we didn't thank our police officers from California State Parks for being with us here today. Yes, please.
I'm Catherine Francis, and I'm here independently. And thank you so much for the years and decades of work and care and love that you put into this project. My question is about the historic Topanga Ranch Motel. And at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned it's a rare opportunity. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about that aspect of this project, like the timeline, stakeholders, and then when it comes to what that future use will end up being, what the decision-making process will be like.
So you're talking about specific for the folks here joining us virtually is with regards to the Topanga Ranch Motel.
Yes.
So in the Topanga Ranch Motel, so the three different alternatives, there's three different options for what happens with the motel. So alternative 2, it goes away completely. And alternative 3, and we retain the majority of it, except I think Jamie mentioned that western slope, which is unstable, will kind of reconfigure the cabins, maybe shift them over a little bit. And alternative 4 removes about half of the complex, roughly, of the ranch motel. So again, as that public process goes through, we'll get feedback. The other portion of this, as far as any kind of historical resource, we do, California State Parks will be doing consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office, and we'll review our effects, the effects to historical resources, and if the preferred alternative is chosen, such as like alternative 2 that removes the motel completely, there'll be mitigation measures that we will have to do to make up for that loss, and those will be negotiated with the SHPO, or State Historic Preservation Office, in that process. So as part of the environmental document, we'll be noting some possible mitigation measures for each of the 3 alternatives, based on the impacts to the motel. Hopefully that answers.
Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate everybody being here and all of your really thoughtful comments. We are going to be here to answer any additional questions. If you'd like, please check out, we have some larger posters of the different alternatives that we can discuss, and some of the aerial photos, some historic photos over there, and also up front. So I encourage you to stay and talk to us some more.
Yeah, just to reiterate, there's a question here that will this material be available at our website? The answer is yes, it will be.
Okay, and the material will be available at our website as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Last thing, will there be any need or opportunities for volunteers later on in the project? Like if there's not adequate capability or not?
So I think Rosie mentioned that a little bit. It was a question about need for volunteers to work on the project. Down the line, we certainly, when we're ready to do some implementation, I think that
that's something that we could definitely get the community involved in. Thank
But you can also help in the watershed. You don't have to help with just the lagoon.
Okay.
So we have crayfish removal events, we have oak planting events. There are many watershed level activities that are going on now that we rely upon volunteers to help with. And that's the way we keep the upper watershed system working, so that it continues to do all the amazing things it does on its way down to the lagoon. So if you go to the website and sign up to be a volunteer, you'll get all the information. One quick question?
I have a quick question, simple. How do you feel that area from the bridge to the motel to Topanga Bowl, how do you think that's maintained? How do you like the existing? Do you think it's well done? Do you think it's kept clean? Do you think it's maintained?
No, it's degraded.
Why?
Because in order to do any action on that, State Parks has to go through this whole process.
So even sweeping or trimming or like we got to do this whole thing just to get started?
No, well, are you talking about like
simple, you know?
like
You can't have
Arundel removal or
simple. How do
something
we
like
go big time?
Yeah, I think you're right. We will be able to do some like Arundel removal stuff and some vegetation stuff. So yes.
I mean, I feel like I'm lumping a bunch of groups and people together, but like it seems like we should be able to handle that.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? And I'd be happy to help, you know,
Thank
but
you.
like,
So did you?
if we can't
put your
handle
name
that,
on there?
what are we talking about?
So do we have your name?
What's that?
Concessionaires also have a role to play, the control on that.
Do we have any concessionaires?
Yeah.
Where?
So, all right, guys, I think we're going to finish it up now and go to
We're all on the
informal.
same team.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.